Welcome. I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. Never wear a striped shirt on television. It's not what you're supposed to do. If you only had some experience, you know that. From the Denver Post editorial editor, Curtis Hubbard, thank you for being here.
Happy to join you.
No stripes there. And the editorial editor from the Colorado Springs Gazette, good friend Wayne Laugesen. Glad to have you.
Thank you, John.
All right, we did this little get-together 6 months ago. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
And we made some prognostications. I said that Romney would win the primary and lose in the general election. You called Newt Gingrich from the beginning.
I'm here to do my end zone dance today.
All right, go ahead. You go. You deserve it.
Colorado has become a purple state, and you saw that in 2006. You saw it again in 2008. You saw it in 2010, which is the worst of the worst years for Republicans. It was a no-brainer that assuming he was not caught doing something in the White House a la Bill Clinton, that Obama would put together the coalition to win Colorado. All of our population is in the metro area.
Let me do the.
Yeah.
You called it correctly 6 months ago. You called Romney. You called Obama. I never liked you to begin with.
Feelings mutual.
Okay. What made you so certain that long ago?
Because you see the demographic trends in the state. Increased number of Latinos. They've grown from 13% to 14%. The Republicans in the state haven't done anything to reach out to them. Increased African American votes, again, haven't done anything to reach out to them. Women make up 51% of the electorate. Single women especially break for Democratic candidates. And the Republican Party continues down this narrow path that it makes it easy for them to be attacked by Democrats for being concerned about what's going on in my bedroom, what's going on in my home. And that's not a message that works in Colorado.
I know nothing is going on in your bedroom, so we're fine there. Actually, one of the exit polls from the Washington Post showed in Colorado that women were split almost 50-50 between the two.
The final exit poll, it was 51 to 48 for Obama, and it was.
That's still a whole lot tighter.
3 points.
That's a whole lot tighter than I ever thought it would be.
Down 5 points from earlier.
4 years ago.
But you have to look at, not all women, they make up a majority, 51%. So that's an even bigger margin when you're looking at the total electorate.
But still, that margin of women going for Obama is down substantially from 4 years ago.
Yeah, but not down far enough.
Down far enough. All right, bring it over here. I wasn't shocked that Obama won. I was hopeful that I had a sense that Colorado might well go for Obama. We've done this trick before with Bill Clinton, where first term was Bill, and then the second term we didn't vote for Bill. And I wouldn't have been surprised that Obama won nationally, but I was flabbergasted that the clean sweep that he had in those swing states, and that Romney picked up none of those.
Well, I'm not surprised
what
at
happened
all.
here?
First of all, I think we are clearly a purple state and soon to be a blue state if trends continue. It's not about women, though there was the margin you pointed out, Curtis. That's not a big margin, and women care a lot more about the economy than they do birth control and abortion. And I think this election showed that. The problem here in Colorado, like all the other swing states, is Latinos. Not that Latinos are a problem. Problem is that Republicans have been, as we said in an editorial the day after the election, felony stupid regarding their approach to Latinos, and they got what they had coming. This is what Ronald Reagan called a natural Republican constituency. These are church-going, family values, work ethic people who don't like abortion, by the way. A lot of them don't even like contraception. The Republican Party has a lot that would attract the Latino vote. Instead, they ostracized this demographic.
How so?
They ostracized this demographic with this sort of, let's try to outdo each other, let's try to outswagger each other on anti-immigration hysteria. Let's scare everyone about the immigrants. And everyone knows they're talking about Latino immigrants. And all of these, some of your finest American citizens who are Hispanic are related to the people who they hate.
So you're saying it was just immigration? I'll go a little. Let me go try it a little differently.
Primarily immigration, but it ties
might
in
be.
with
But
access.
I think there's there's a patronizing attitude that Republicans have had towards the Latino community. It's the same patronizing attitude they've had towards homosexual Republicans. There's a log cabin Republicans, and we'll pat you on the head and go, oh yeah, it's a big tent, when in fact it's not really a big tent.
Right.
And I think that reads, and I think Curtis might be onto something, and that just makes me, nauseous.
Well, yeah, they want to maintain. They have historically been the party of the middle-aged and older white people, and that is not a growing demographic in this country. And anyone who thinks you can continue winning on that kind of a platform, on that kind of an appeal, that's just crazy. I don't recall, who was it who said, it was Ruben Navarrete. He's a syndicated columnist. He said this is just a suicide mission by Republicans. He called that a year ago.
But going into the election, did you think Colorado would go for Romney? I had a glimmer of hope that it would.
I hoped. We had an editorial board meeting with Mitt Romney in which he used it to sell us on endorsing him 2 days before his knockout first debate appearance. And we were really blown away. I kind of went in there lukewarm. Well, he is the Republican nominee. We're going to lean that way. The Gazette's editorial board is going to lean that way. We came away from the meeting legitimately impressed and inspired and wrote a very heartfelt, impassioned endorsement of him. So I hoped he would win. I wasn't real confident that he would.
We talked a little bit about this before. Let's bring it up again. The other part that got me was the willing suspension of disbelief on my side, in that we had guys saying this isn't our bag. Not only are Republicans going to win, not only is Romney going to win, we're going to win big. It's going to be an electoral landslide. And these weren't chumps that did it. I mean, Michael Barone, a friend of mine, he's as good as anyone gets on following these issues. George Will, Dick Morris, Karl Rove, Fred Barnes.
The skewed polls argument.
And the idea that the polls are skewed to Democrats, that they oversample Democrats, and people aren't quite telling the truth. It's the economics that's going to
right, and what turned out was it was not an election like 2004. It was much more like 2008. Not quite as high turnout, higher turnout in the swing states, but young people turned out as a higher percentage this time as opposed to 2008, which I think surprised a lot of people. The talk going in among a lot in the pundit class was, there's this enthusiasm gap, and the young people aren't, they don't have the posters of Obama hanging up in their dorm room, was Paul Ryan's line during the convention, and that turned out to be false. And the Democrats in swing states knew what their target was, and they went after it. There's a reason that Barack Obama went to Boulder 3 times. There's a reason that he was in Fort Collins on the day that school started, and all of those new young voters who've come from Illinois and California and states, that weren't swing states could register to vote as Democrats in Colorado.
I think it all started with Dick Morris. That's my understanding. Dick knows a lot about running numbers. I mean, he got Clinton elected by working with numbers and responding to them properly. He thought that 2008, that phenomenal turnout of young minority voters and women was an outlier. As he said last night, explaining himself, that it's not an outlier, it's a trend. That may be, or it may not be. One thing is for sure, though, and that is that the Obama ground game was really good at, and maybe he inspired them. Maybe those kind of polls, those pundits who said the young, the women, and the minorities are not going to come out like they did 4 years ago. They're going to come out like they used to come out. Maybe that inspired the Obama ground game to make sure they got out, because an unenthusiastic vote counts just as much as an enthusiastic vote does.
No, because the ground game started so much earlier, and my take on it is this. Republicans and the conservative machine were not good at the ground game. We're not good at the ugly door-knocking registration, get-out-the-vote drives, whereas I heard a year ago that Obama's team was planning to hire at least 300 people to register 50,000 Hispanics. And out came the voter registration drives. You saw them down at the 16th Street Mall. And they can't say they're targeting the people they want, but they're targeting the people they want. They actually ended up bringing in 80,000 100,000 new registrations before the cutoff
and
month ago.
And they undid a lot of what Scott Gessler tried to do by bumping active voters off the rolls. They got 75,000 voters to reactivate their status. And there were big margins between Republicans and Democrats on the voter rolls after 2010, even more after Gessler's move. And by November 1st, the Democrats had almost completely closed that gap. And that's the story of this election, I think, is going to be the Obama machine's ground game and just how much they used data, not just to target voters, but to locate voters.
But not just the data. I mean, the right has their databases as well. But the amount of forces, I'm talking people, young people getting paid $10 an hour to stand out there and grab names, write them down, to get out the vote efforts. When you look at you can go to the Secretary of State's website and they list all the registration groups, those groups that are authorized to register voters. And there's about 120 of them. I recognize maybe 8 or 10 on the right. And they're all the obvious ones. And then all the ones on the left, they're everywhere. They're omnipresent. And that's the kind of stuff that Republicans don't do well. We like going to cocktail parties and bitching about the state of affairs and what needs to be done.
Who doesn't?
That type of work is difficult. It's hard. It's expensive, and it's detail oriented.
Well,
and I think that a Chicago-raised politician knows the importance of this stuff.
Months before Romney even had a presence in Colorado, a young African-American woman from Southern California walked into my office and started pitching Obama. She knew who she was talking to. She knew what the Gazette's editorial board was about. But she was going to come in there and try to facilitate us in any way that she could. Now, Obama never would agree to meet with our editorial board. He doesn't do a lot of editorial boards, and when he does, it's sort of off the record and by phone, as the Des Moines Register found out. But his team did not neglect us. We had to go looking for the Romney team, and they showed up late, and then they were very helpful, and they did facilitate us in a very good way. But they were way behind the curve.
I think we saw the same thing, and just in terms of organization, the faces from Colorado politics, the smart people in the Democratic Party were recruited by the Obama campaign, and they were part of the machine. And most of the communications with the Romney campaign were coming out of Boston with people who had 202 or 305 area codes.
I had the exact same experience, which was the Romney campaign was a franchise of what was going on in Boston. We were the Colorado franchise. There weren't that many Colorado faces involved in that team. There was Joe Garcia, I think, and there was Monica Owens. But after that, the upper management there was nobody from Colorado.
Yeah.
We didn't know who they were.
His national political director, whose name is escaping me, but he's a guy with a Colorado connection, and Rich Beeson, and knows the state well and has relationships in the state. But obviously he had bigger fish to fry than little old Colorado. I mean, I think they realized pretty early on, look, we've got to put a lot of energy into Ohio and Florida, where there are significant votes. And they spent a lot of time in Colorado, but I don't know that they spent a lot of energy in Colorado.
I think they did spend a lot of energy. I think of the Aurora polling place that had an hour and a half wait to vote because people were being bussed in. My team doesn't. Well, we don't ride the bus. It's just not done. So we're certainly not going to drive a bus, and that machinery doesn't work. Let's talk about the coattails of this, because the Colorado legislature has changed. Republicans honestly thought that we were going to pick up 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 House seats. Instead, we lost 5.
Yeah, the Republicans need to get new pollsters and a new calculator. I mean, this is the second cycle in a row in Colorado where I talk to people on both sides, and it's what I wrote about last week, this bizarro world where you hear one side saying one thing and another side saying something completely different. And for the second cycle in a row, the Democrats had it nailed. The question is, I think it goes back to redistricting. I think the Republicans ultimately were outfoxed in redistricting. The Democrats created maps that benefited their candidates. They ran good candidates. They outspent Republicans 3-1 promoting those candidates. They did so early. They did so beginning in June and July. they started pumping up their candidates. They put resources. They were attached to the Obama for America machine, and so there's 65 offices across the state that were there to support candidates for the state House and state Senate on the Democratic side. And where was that support on the Republican side? They were just overmatched.
Mm-hmm. And overfunded. I mean, the left had the ability to do that. The Romney office didn't come into Colorado until very late. Obama had several field offices. Planned Parenthood had something like 25 field offices. The SCIU had a myriad of little groups that were out there working. Yeah. Losing the state house, there's only one real loser that I can see out of all this. And that's Governor Hickenlooper. If there was one guy who has to toe the party line and say, "Oh, this is terrific," no, this sucks for him, because now every goofball bit of liberal legislation will comfortably get to his desk, and he's going to have to make some decisions.
Yeah, economically, he's a pretty moderate guy, and he's going to have to veto a lot of stuff that comes across his desk, and that's not going to endear him to a party that's already a little bit suspicious of some of his positions.
But he's got an advantage. So you think back to Ritter, and everybody says it's going to be just like Ritter when the Democrats took over the governor's mansion and the state house and the state senate in 2006. The difference is he's been in the building for 2 years. He's surrounded himself by people who are familiar with the process. Christine Scanlon on his staff, Alan Salazar. They will stop a lot of the crap from getting up to his desk to begin with. And he's a smart enough politician to know, hey, there's an opportunity for me here to demonstrate that I'm willing to buck my party when I think it's in the best interest of the state, and that will play well for a guy who's up for statewide re-election in 2 years.
Although he hasn't done that yet. When
well, he hasn't had to because the Republicans have had control of the House.
Ritter was a managerial nightmare. I think he was a wonderful guy. I'd be happy if he babysat my kids. But unlike his predecessors, Owens and Romer, who really knew how to run the machinery of the executive branch. I mean, there was a chain of command that was in control. And those guys had this is what we're going to do year one, this is what we want to do year two. Owens was good at that. Romer was good at that. Ritter was good at that when it came to energy mandates. He was able to do that every year. Hickenlooper has been masterful by taking no strong positions on anything yet, and he's been able to be above it. That changes real soon.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, the thing, Hickenlooper came into the job with executive experience. Ritter didn't, and that's the distinction that you're seeing there. But we'll see how it plays out now when he is going to get hit with some of these kind of challenges that you.
One of the strong stands that Hickenlooper did take was early on. He said, "We're going to put more money into reserves. We have to have more money in the bank," and that upset a lot of Democrats who wanted, to lessen the cuts that were happening to education. He's going to run up against that, I think, now, where he's got a budget that ultimately boosts the rainy day fund. I think it's 5% he's trying to get to, and they're going to look at that and say, well, we need to make up for all of the lost education funding over the last 3.5 years, 4 years. Let's do the minimum required for savings, and so that will be one of the battles to watch, I think, coming forward.
Gay marriage, civil unions. Why do I have a feeling that will be the first bill out of the House?
I don't think it will. I don't think it needs to be. I think that they will address it as it's any other piece of legislation. We're not going to, grandstand on it. We're going to move it through like anything else. We're going to come up with an agenda of these are the things that we'd like to do, and it's one of them. I think the gay marriage question is one that we'll be asking next, which is when and who will run something to appeal Colorado's constitutional amendment that prohibits gay marriage.
I think first things first. I think first there's going to be that civil unions bill, which will certainly become law now. And you got to wonder, the mishandling of it at the end of last session, did that add to the change in the House, or was that just it didn't matter?
Well, it depends on whom you ask. Amy Stevens, I asked her that question, and she said it didn't matter except for money. and Tim Gill was activated as a result of that decision. And
for those who don't know, Tim Gill is the Democratic funder who's also gay, and this has been his big agenda.
Founder of Quark.
And so he's the guy who puts the money. A lot of money and a lot of brain power went into these races that might not have come in otherwise. But I think it's also it's a reflection of where the state is, and the reality is that in the last 4 years, the public acceptance of civil unions and gay marriage is on an upward path. Our most recent poll at the Denver Post, we asked people what sort of recognition should same-sex couples have from the government, and a plurality, 30-some%, said gay marriage. Then it was civil unions. Combined, that was almost 60% of Coloradans supported some sort of legal recognition for same-sex couples. It's a winning issue for Democrats. It's
been a matter of time all along. It's coming, and you know what you just touched on, the Tim Gill being energized and putting that really going back to 1992 is a big part of what's happened to Colorado, why Colorado's purple and heading blue very quickly.
But let me also put out there are a bunch of people on the left that do not want to see civil unions. Why? Because it has been held up as a holy grail that we must reach, and reaching it, they go, well, now what holds a coalition together? The way the Republicans completely fumbled the ball the last legislative session was a godsend to the left. Mm-hmm. And I think there are some who are politically wise saying, we get this. Oh my God, now what do we do? It's the end of The Graduate. What do we do next?
Nicolais with Coloradans for Freedom had a great quote in today's paper where he said, it's not just about civil unions, it's about compassion. And when you don't come across as compassionate on that issue, it's hard for people to believe that you're compassionate when you're talking about jobs and the economy, which is the overriding Republican mission. And there are a lot of smart Republicans who got that. There was Republican support, we shouldn't forget, for the issue in 2000 in the legislature.
Including Don Beasley and including
B.J. Nickel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, then they took a lot of heat for taking that stance. All right, we got about 5 minutes left. You guys want to get high?
No,
come on. I was out of all things on the ballot, I thought this thing was going to go down. And I thought it was going to be close. And I thought, well, we're moving to the point where we can have a reasonable discussion about legalizing pot. I never thought 53, 54%. Would you agree?
I was the same way. I thought that it was one of those issues where not enough. I knew Republicans, there was the sort of the libertarian wing of the Republican Party who would say, this makes sense, but I didn't think there were enough Democrats would stick with the issue, that suburban moms would hear the message. I think one of the things that it ran into was, because so much money was spent on the presidential election, there was no way for them to get in and buy airtime to get their message out. So there was never an effective No on 64 ad campaign. And as a result of the increase in young people at the polls, which we talked about, the increased number of people in Colorado who just think marijuana is not that big of a deal given our experience with medical marijuana, that it sailed through. But I thought, like you, it was going to be a narrow loss.
Well, I didn't think it was going to be a narrow loss. I thought it would go about it like it did. I wasn't surprised in the least.
You potheads are closer to the market than I am.
We had Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson out here quite a bit talking to students, encouraging them to vote for this. And he actually, for a Libertarian candidate, did pretty well in Colorado. There was some speculation he could actually hurt Obama. Of course, that didn't happen. But what happened, the reason, first of all, it was a great campaign. It talked about regulating marijuana like alcohol, generating money with marijuana. That appealed to a lot of people who don't have strong feelings one way or another about this. But I think the biggest factor in all of this is that we've had a thriving medical marijuana industry in Colorado for 10 years, and it really took off about 3 years ago when the Obama administration's Justice Department issued a letter saying they wouldn't, basically said we won't interfere in state medical marijuana laws. And then we saw all of these stores emerge on the scene, and nothing horrible has happened. I don't think that the average resident of Colorado thinks that the marijuana seller in the strip mall is creating problems that we didn't already have with the criminal seller on the street corner. So we were conditioned for this.
Did pot help Obama win? In other words, were a lot of those younger voters, did they come out?
I think so, and I think one of the reasons Gary Johnson didn't hurt Obama is because if you supported pot and you could vote for pot and Obama at the same time. You didn't have to, you didn't have to go to Gary Johnson for your pro-pot vote.
Even though a lot of the hardcore marijuana policy folks said, wait a second, this administration has not been as kind as they originally said they would, and therefore they thought they were going to lose votes to Gary Johnson. That didn't happen because I think the average kid who voted was voting for pot, and why is there? You might as well vote for him.
And you'll note that in California, when legalization was on the ballot there, the Justice Department was outspoken in its opposition if California went down that road. They were silent in Colorado in advance of the election, and that probably has something to do with how close the polls between Romney and Obama
We actually have more medical marijuana availability in Colorado than in California. California gets the attention because there's a better media market out there, and if the Justice Department is going to put any resources into this, they want attention on it. This is going to be a really interesting thing to see play out because it's going to take a Tabor vote before we can actually tax marijuana.
Let me do this one more time because this is great.
Out of California.
The AG, Jon Caldara, has said you can't tax pot because you need to ask the vote of the people, and the ballot measure itself didn't do that.
Right.
So now we've got the competitive advantage. Don't go to Washington State. Come to Colorado. We've got duty-free pot here. We've got less oxygen, so you're going to get a better high. This is going to be a destination state.
Yeah, I think the folks in the State House will go after the revenue, especially given the Democratic control there. But it's also, I think the thing to keep in mind is that there's a lot of sort of bogeyman, fear-mongering arguments out there, and this doesn't change a whole lot in Colorado. You can't smoke it on the street. It's not going to be sold in 7-Elevens. You have to smoke it in the privacy of, somewhere out of the public. They're going to set up a retail system for managing the distribution of it.
Just a few seconds left. Tell me, did the right have any victories in Colorado this week?
Amendment 64.
The Libertarians did. And
Mike Kaufman being reelected in his district.
But that doesn't change things. I don't think he was in that much danger. I don't see any big victory. Yeah, I'll agree with you on 64, but I don't see any big victory. All right, no. You again, congratulations. He called it 6 months ahead. Curtis Hubbard. You get the $5. Thank you. Hey, thank you so much,
and
Wayne.
Congratulate
thank you.
me. I called 64.
Yeah, but yeah. Listen for me on KHOW Radio on Sundays. Tell a friend about the Independence Institute. We'll see you next week.